Welcome to Frickety Frack. We do talk back. Thank you for joining us in this episode.
Hello, my name is Jeff and I'm Frick.
My name is Patrick and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where we will discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. We are going through the Prime Video series Invincible and connecting lessons from each episode to teachings in the Bible. And just as many of you are, we're also fans of other things as well. So when we finish Invincible, we will go in a different direction and look at anything ranging from anime, comics, video games, movies, or other things that we're fans of. We got the name of the show from our father who dubbed us Frick and Frack since we were kids.
All right, we are currently on the third episode of the first season of Invincible, and the episode is entitled Who You Callin' Ugly. The episode opens with Omni-Man giving the eulogy at the Guardians of the Globe's funeral. One thing that does happen is that they show a very public funeral for the Guardians, and then immediately right after they have a private one. And Eve tells Mark the reason why that they do this is so that they have to keep this one private to try and keep souvenir hunters away so that they don't go grave robbing. While at the private funeral, Cecil taps Robot to lead the new Guardians of the Globe. And back at the Grayson residence, Nolan has a very nonchalant attitude towards the passing of the Guardians, which upsets Debbie and Mark. It is also discovered that Donald has set up a stakeout of the Grayson home across the street, the Grayson family being unaware of this. Mark calls Amber, and they struggle to have a conversation, but eventually Mark gets around to asking her to a study date. Adam Eve goes to the teen team headquarters, and she finds Rexplode cheating on her with her teammate Duplicate. Invincible shows up to the robot-led tryouts of the Guardians of the Globe, and Robot asks why he won't try out. Invincible explains that his dad wants to be the one that trains him, and his mom doesn't really want him missing any more school. So then Robot follows up with wondering why he came then if he's not going to try out. And Invincible explains, I wouldn't miss this. You get to see all these heroes. As the tryouts progress, Robot announces that the new Guardians of the Globe are Black Samson, Shrinking Ray, Duplicate, Monster Girl, Rexplode, and Adam Eve. Monster Girl's inclusion leads to Rex making fun of her, which in turns to her beating the snot out of him. Eve announces that she won't be on the same team as Rex and Kate because of the affair. Now, the first day of the new Guardians doesn't go well. Rex continues to be a jerk and antagonizes the team. The team disperses, leaving Monster Girl alone with Robot. She explains that the training regimen Robot wants to put the team on will not work for her. She explains that even though she looks like a top child, she's actually 24. Every time she transforms, she gets younger due to the curse that gave her her powers. Omni-Man is seen judging the new Guardians as pathetic. Mark has William over to help him prepare for his first date with Amber, and William gives him some pointers and then sneaks out the back. While Amber and Mark are talking, Cecil calls Mark repeatedly until Amber leaves. Cecil teleports in and tells Mark he needs to decide right now if he wants to be a superhero. Mark agrees and has his first assignment at Mount Rushmore. Mark also openly admits that he doesn't know what state that is in. South Dakota, by the way. Cecil teleports as Amber returns, and Cecil teleports out as Amber returns, and Mark gives Amber a lame excuse as he has to go team up with Adam Eve to take on Doc Seismic at Mount Rushmore. Adam Eve and Invincible fight Doc Seismic while also trying to save the park. The fight eventually ends with Doc Seismic falling into lava. Mark rushes home because he left Amber in his room for an hour. Nolan reminds him to change out of his costume. Amber's angry, but she wants to get to know the guy that would take punches for her instead of throw punches for her. Donald is at the aftermath of an Omni-Man fight where he notes he's never seen Omni-Man on the ropes like that and that the kaiju monster might still be alive. Cecil gives him the order to put it on ice. Eve is at the team base throwing away her stuff from Rexplode when Rex tries to win her back. Eve rejects him and wishes him luck with the new team. She flies to Mark's house, but sees he's kissing Amber. For an unknown reason, Robot frees the Mahler twins from jail. Dark Blood pays a visit to Debbie, hoping to get more answers. However, Dark Blood vanishes when Nolan arrives.
So with the um the TV series being an adaptation of the comic series Invincible, there are some differences, and in the first two episodes we've covered some of them, and so now we're getting into where the differences are going to be mostly out of order for the story, or they're just going to handle things in a little bit different ways. And so there's just not going to be big ones. So the only one that we wanted to point out in this episode was that Shrinking Ray is a girl in the show, but was originally a guy in the comics.
And this actually leads into a good point where we actually have three notable first appearances in this episode in the form of Monster Girl, Shrinking Ray, and Black Samson. Monster Girl honestly is, and we get a little bit of her origin in this episode. She brings it up, and I'm glad that they kept this, because it's a very big deal for her character, and the fact that every single time she transforms into this giant green monster, by the way, each time she transforms, she's more powerful. They haven't really touched, I don't think they really touched on that in this show this season, but that was something in the comics. So every time she transforms, she's more powerful. But the cost of that is that she gets younger. So she looks like she's about 12, I would say. Is that kind of what the age that they're going for?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's roughly about 12 years old. And so when Rex starts making fun of her, she comes back at her like a 24-year-old girl or 24-year-old woman, because that's what she actually is. She just doesn't look it, and then proceeds to beat the snot out of him, and it is glorious.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
And Adam Eve's commentary during the whole thing is as much fun seeing her beat the snot out of Rex Explode. Adam Eve's commentary is great. She's like, oh, it's like, are we going to stop this? She's like, why?
He's like, well, he asked for it, like kind of like, so yeah, so she's one of my favorite side characters in the series. She's a very tragic character. And I do genuinely really like her character. So it's just something that glad that she finally got to be in the show. And so yeah, and then Shrinking Ray in the comics didn't have a very big role. Like, Shrinking Ray was just around whenever the new Guardians was around.
Yeah.
So her being on the team is kind of not, and I don't really care that they switched Shrinking Ray from a guy to a girl. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Mostly because the character didn't have a very significant role in Invincible to begin with. So I honestly don't really care. And then getting to meet Black Samson, he's an interesting character, but again, he's got a very fairly small role from my recollection from the comics. Like, he doesn't leave a really big impact.
Yeah, same. They eventually moved past the Guardians of the Globe as a whole for the most part.
Yeah, it's not too long where the comics does a really big a big shift from the world in general, and really focuses it on Mark and his family, which we won't get into specifically about what we mean by his family, because I don't want to spoil that for the season, but it shifts, the view gets much tighter after a while. Well, it gets tighter but bigger at the same time. Does that, I don't know, like, do you think that's a pretty accurate description?
Yes, that is actually a perfect way to describe it. I know, for those of you who are listening at home, I know it makes absolutely zero sense, especially if you have not read the comics. but we're telling you the truth. It gets tighter, but also bigger all at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so
Um,
it's but there's a big shift away from uh the regular superhero stuff that Invincible does in the beginning to yeah. So
yeah,
what we
the series switches from a very grounded to a very um outlandish. Well, that might not be the best descriptor, but it just gets bigger. However, it focuses more on Mark.
yeah
Um, and so we don't see as much from everybody else uh, after a while. The in the comics, anyways. I don't know if that's what they'll do with the TV show adaptation, but if it stays as true as it has with the comics, I can see that happening. Some of these other characters could get heavily cut back on their screen time. There will be a few of them if they stay true to the comics. Will still continue to have fairly prominent roles. Um, but yeah, so that was a long tangent.
yeah
That was a long chase down the rabbit hole. My bad.
that's all right
Sorry.
that's all right.
But again, that's just how awesome Invincible is. There's so much to discuss, and I can't wait for everybody else to get caught up and watch. Like if you're only going to watch the series, there's so much out there that I can't wait for everybody else to catch up on.
Yeah. So as Jeff mentioned in the beginning of the episode, is the funeral for the Guardians of the Globe, because it's just, at the end of last episode was the announcement that the Guardians of the Globe have been killed. And so this deals with that aftermath. And when they get home, Debbie points out, like, your friends just died. And he's like, coworkers. And this is now we know, and as the audience, we know Omni-Man did it. Now I mean, obviously everyone else doesn't know that he did it. And but this is one of those seeds where it's planting um the doubt in Omni-Man. And because when
Well,
she said the
I would
word friends, he flinched. you know
well, I didn't think he really. I personally don't think he really flinched. He just was very quick to be coworkers. It wasn't.
yeah.
It's like,
Well,
oh,
that's what I mean by flinch. It was like he was very quick to correct her, to be like, no, coworkers, not friends.
uh,
And so this is just showing, like, where, because of the quickly correcting and the frustration over Mark
Mark
being
dwelling on the
upset,
yeah.
and he was like, no, you have got to leave your work stuff out there so that you can be a you know Mark here, and things like that. And because it's showing that the killing of the Guardians has changed him fundamentally. And we can't tell you now in this episode without spoiling the end of the season, of what's to come. But uh, you know um, he's clearly
There's not.
changing. And
Yeah,
it's
he's definitely changing his demeanor, and he's because even in the first episode, you could notice that there's a lot that he's holding back, and a lot of it is because Mark hasn't gotten his powers yet, and all of that change, and you hear the hints. You even in the first episode, you even hear the hints of it when Nolan is like, maybe we just would have been better off if Mark never got his powers. And when we get to the end of the season, we'll see why. We'll see why Nolan says that.
mhm.
Um, but uh, but yeah, there's definitely there's an attitude shifting within Nolan, and it is becoming very apparent.
Yeah. So like when Dark Blood shows up at the end of the episode, because of his attitude that he's shown in this episode and some other moments in previous episodes, it's Debbie's kind of picking up on something. And
Yeah, I think she doesn't full on suspect yet. I don't think, but I do think she
no,
thinks there's something wrong, that there might be something that he's not fully going in, that Nolan's fully talking about.
exactly. Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
but to where she suspects of what Nolan's involvement is, that's not yet. That will come, but sorry, slightly spoiler alert. But at the moment, I honestly believe that the only two people that really suspect Nolan are Cecil and Damien. That's it. Those are the only two people that suspect right now.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think anybody else really suspects at this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of the really awesome parts. It was the tryout part of the episode. Actually, this episode was just actually really good throughout. So all of the parts were actually, in all honesty, really pretty good. So it was really cool to see, because again, we see this a few times throughout the episode. Mark is a superhero fan. Like, he collects comic books. They make it well known that he does that. And and part of it is, he grew up with his dad being a superhero.
Yeah, he's known
Um,
for a long time that his dad was Omni Man.
and so um, so him just geeking out about the other superheroes that were all there trying out to be members of the Guardians of the Globe was actually pretty legit. I'm, in all honesty, that's kind of how I would be if, like, all of a sudden, just talking about, like, one of my big dreams as a kid is I wanted to be a professional basketball player. Uh, like, I would start geeking out if, like, all of a sudden I'm lacing up my shoes and I'm gonna be lobbing passes to LeBron James, or, like, my personal favorite basketball player is Russell Westbrook right now. I uh, Don't at me about him. Uh,
I
I
mean Russell
genuinely enjoy.
Westbrook.
All right, I'm leaving. I'm not going to have this discussion. Um, there's so many other things that he brings that never. I'm not gonna get into that. That's what this episode is about. But no, just like getting to play with them, and just, I would geek out if all of a sudden I woke up and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I've got a 40-inch vertical. I can run a 40-yard dash in, like, 4.5 seconds or whatever. And I have the hand-eye coordination to play professional level basketball. Oh my gosh, I would totally geek out every time I got on the court with these guys. Uh, so I
I'd
definitely get it.
I'd have the same thing where if all of a sudden I started to work for Funimation and I was voice acting with like Chris Sabat or Rico Fajardo and Monica Rial, Colleen Clickenbeard, any one of them. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm doing. Of course, it's different doing that, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I just did a scene with Chris Sabat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the shame is that generally for those things they're not recording together.
I
Uh,
know they used to do that, but stupid COVID.
well, no, even before that,
No.
generally for your recording sessions, you just go in and you read your parts.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know.
but yeah, but it was cool. It was really cool to see that, to see him kind of geek out like that.
It was a
And
very
then,
Deku thing to do.
yeah, and it's like, one of the things too is that I liked is that even though Monster Girl was beating the crap out of Rexplode, um, and we were all rooting for Monster Girl because Rexplode is a jerk. Uh,
The capital
one of,
J.
yeah, capital J, capital Irk. Um, I genuinely loved seeing the fact that with one punch, when Mark caught her fist, it's like that. That's one of the things that's so far in the series that I've only in regards to how they've depicted Mark that's really kind of annoyed me is that they've depowered him a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that he and his father are supposed to be in a whole nother class level when it comes to strength, like just flat out a whole nother level. Um, and so the fact that Monster Girl was just whooping him, and Rexplode was barely doing any damage to Monster Girl. And then Mark shows up, and Monster Girl, he's like, "I've stopped your fist. Please stop. You
Yeah.
do not hold a candle to me."
And then we move on from this, and Cecil gives him his first mission to go to Mount Rushmore. And I love it. He asks like, "What state is that in again?" And Cecil's just like, "What do
I'm
they teach you in school
I'm
these days?"
I'm actually inspired by this episode, and that I want to go and ask my kids that I coach that are in high school and ask them if they know where Mount Rushmore is.
Yeah,
And I want to see what their answer is. Like I'm totally gonna ask. I'm totally gonna pull a couple of the kids aside and be like, "Hey, you know where Mount Rushmore is?" They'll be, I'm sure some of them are gonna be like, "What's Mount Rushmore?"
yeah,
Um, I'm gonna get some of those answers. But anyways,
yeah.
I'm just kind of curious as to how that will go. One thing I want to give a little shout out to William. Something that I think he said in there I actually do genuinely believe that this is a pretty decent piece of advice when it comes to dating. Every date should be like a first date. Like there's something about, and it's not that you can or should always treat a date like a first date, but trying to recreate that magic every once in a while, man, they're that's not bad. That's not bad advice. Just like every once in a while, just be kind of like, all right, we're going a little old school. We're gonna go like, like we're still getting to know each other, and I don't know. I don't know. You're the married one, so I don't know how you feel about that piece of advice, but I think it's a pretty decent piece of advice.
Yeah, well, and I mean the big thing with any long-term committed relationship is making sure that there's still time for romance. No matter what stage of relationship you're in, if you're dating, engaged, married, um, whatever it might be, always
And not
making
just
sure.
like, then there's even the different levels of of married, newlywed, uh, new parents, you know, golden years, all that's good stuff.
Old fogies.
You know.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, it's always important um,
And
to
then
make sure.
I do love the fact that Mark just tossed everything out the window. It's like, oh crap, she's here. My room's a
Yeah,
mess. No, I'm just gonna throw it out the
yeah,
window.
yeah. No, that's great. And then the fight with Doc Seismic. This Doc Seismic is one of Mark's first supervillains that he fights in the comics, as it is in this show. And one thing I do like is that the fight is more drawn out. Once again, going to show how inexperienced Mark is, and really, like, if we really kind of think about it, Adam Eve is really the one who does like most of the work
Mhm.
in this fight. Like, Mark is just kind of like flying around doing stuff.
Well,
He's
I feel like Mark spends a majority of the fight in damage control. Like
Yeah, I agree.
you know, he's saving the civilians. He's putting Mount Rushmore back together.
Yeah,
Um, and Adam Eve is the one taking the fight to him. Which, especially when you think about like what Adam Eve's particular powers are, you would think they would actually almost reverse that. That Mark would be the one doing the majority of the fight, whereas Adam Eve would be the one saving people because her ability is literally rearranging atoms. That's what she does.
right.
Um, and so I know a lot of times they talk about she's usually just like doing compressed air or whatever, but that's like the most basic aspect of her power. She literally rearranges atoms, and so she
Yeah,
would actually make a great support hero. In the fact that she could, not just a great support hero, she's just a phenomenal hero. Period. Um,
exactly. But yeah, no, I agree with the idea. If you look at it from like Dungeons and Dragons or um massive online role
MMO,
playing games,
yeah,
MMOs,
MMOs.
she I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Sword Art Online anime. That one's based around MMOs, and there's a specific character in there. Her name is Asuna, and she goes back and forth where she can be a main attack person, but she's also an amazing support person. So that would be like the way Adam Eve is that if she's deciding to be all out attack, then she's going to be awesome. But if she chooses to be support, she's going to be awesome at that too. Her. I mean, like Jeff was saying, her powers are fantastic and phenomenal, and at such a high level. Um, and I love seeing her growth in the comics too. Like she's going to play an extremely significant role in the comics. So she will always have a significant role in the show. But anyway, so I would do that. And so this is continuing Mark's entry into banter with villains. But Doc Seismic starts it. He was like, it's like, not only is Abraham Lincoln the great emancipator, but he'll emancipate you from your life. As he's knocked off Abraham Lincoln's face and he's trying to kill people with it. And Marx catches it. He's like, that is terrible. And it's a whole great scene. I love the Doc Seismic fight in this
Yeah. Well,
episode.
As Mark puts Abraham Lincoln's face back, he's like, that's how you get, and his comment was, and that's how you get ahead in life. And he's just, and Mark's even come like, ooh, that was bad. And Doc Seismic's comment is like, I'm not going to disagree. And I just absolutely loved it. And so like they kind of did this a couple of different times, like trading these, really awful one-liners. And at the end of it, Mark looks at Eve and it's like, oh, these are all bad.
Yeah.
I just absolutely loved it. It was a great fight.
Yeah.
And
And,
um,
and this is really honestly the first time where Mark sees this as fun. Seeing the superhero life as fun, because basically, really up until this point, he had that one run in with Titan, and then he had the Flaxen Army last episode. That was it. Um, so
has he fought the Mauler twins yet?
I don't, I don't think so.
Because that's something that's a little different from the comics, isn't it? In the comics, the Mauler twins are some of the first people he ever fought.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. He fought them.
He actually fought them in his PJs in the comics.
Yeah, I think it was like issue 2 he fought them.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, so he fights the Mauler twins early on in the comic, and like he's the reason why they're in jail. Later on, like when this event kind of happens. At least I think this event happened in the comics. I can't remember. It's starting to blur together.
Yeah.
Anywho, but one of my favorite parts during this whole time with Doc Seismic is that Doc Seismic insults Eve's costume. He's like, "What? Look at the costume they put on you. I mean, look at the pandering, blah blah blah."
To gender norms or something along
Yeah,
those
something
lines.
like yeah, whatever. And she's like, "I designed the costume myself." And so actually one of the interesting things about Adam Eve's costume, and once again, I hate to name drop, sort of. But as I mentioned before, Robert Kirkman shopped at the comic book store that I worked at. But one of the guys who did some of the extra Invincible work, like the main Invincible comic was written by Robert Kirkman. But then there were some extra titles that were written by some other people. And one of the guys that I worked with at A Plus, he was that writer. His name is Benito Sereno. Is his pen name. I won't give out his real name because he has a pen name for a reason. So that's what I'll use. His name is Benito Sereno. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. And so he wrote that. And so he actually wrote the miniseries when Adam and Eve and Rex Explode first meet. And her first costume is very similar to the one she had now, except for she had a skirt. And that was in the first series. And then the second series of Adam, Eve, and Rex Explode. At the end of that mini series, she decides to forego the skirt and get to this costume that she had in the comics, which is actually this costume on the cartoon is actually more modest than her actual costume, because it's actually
and
just
not
basically
and yeah, and not that her costume was like incredibly immodest or anything like that, but it was just it was the it
super.
was the
It was
it was the swimsuit look,
yep,
and but it was a full body swimsuit, so it wasn't like and so it's not like in the way that they drew her as well in the comics, it's not like it's like for one, so one of the most infamous I will call them like swimsuit costumes that there has been drawn, in my opinion, would probably be Miss Marvel. Would you think that there's anybody worth, like, in terms of like especially cheese shots, like there just be like times where like they basically would draw Miss Marvel like she's wearing a thong.
yeah,
And they never really drew Adam Eve like that with her when but what I would call her bathing suit. Leotard would probably be an accurate
yeah.
description
It's
as
it's
well.
like a gymnast leotard. It's because I mean she's long sleeves and everything, so it would be like a gymnast leotard. Um, and
But
so
yeah,
I mean,
so the animated look is different in where it gives her shorts.
shorts, yeah.
Um,
Instead of ending in the normal like gymnast leotard bathing suit kind of thing, it's shorts, but it's still, she's showing a lot of leg, and uh, so when I first saw it, I was like, oh, good. I'm glad they kind of changed that from the comic. But I mean, honestly, I also don't mind Eve's costume in the comic either. I mean, it's not like Jeff said. Like one of the things that I do appreciate about it is that she doesn't like have a constant wedgie like um, Carol Danvers as when she was Ms. Marvel had, especially when she came back into prominence after House of M. It's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into it. We're already going along. But that's what you're here for, right? Um, uh, and so Mark finishes that fight, realizes that Amber's still waiting for him, or hoping that she's still waiting for him, and comes back and is like, and in Nolan's telling him, he's like, this is a good thing. You need to figure out your work-life balance. And that's actually a really good lesson in of itself. This is like and this is still one of those moments where Nolan is a good dad, despite the fact that he murders people. But uh, but he still is trying to teach his son. He's like, you got, if you want to be a hero, you've got to have that work-life balance. But then he lays a seed. He's like, but we're also Vulturemites, so we've got extra responsibilities on top of that. And so that's a seed for later in this season, of what that means. But he's like, you got to have that balance. And our dads had that same kind of conversation with us about work-life balance um, and things like that. And mentors of mine as well, like fellow pastors, they're like, yeah, it's like, if you need to, you turn your phone off on your Sabbath day, because they need to know, don't mess with you on your Sabbath day. Um, uh, Not that I do, because unfortunately, that's often when someone will really need me. Um, and so,
well, it'd
but
also be hard for you to turn your phone off too, because you have a wife and 4 small children.
yeah, but we're all home, so
So, and one of the things that like during this entire conversation that Nolan is, being a, being a good dad and giving him some advice and talking to him and reaching out to him, the entire time it's very subtle if you're not listening for it, but you can hear Mark going, uh-huh, uh-huh,
It's itching to get
uh-huh,
upstairs.
It's just like, dude, I've got a girl in my room, or I hope she's still there. And it's just like, I'm trying, it's like, Dad, you shut up. But I'm not going to tell you to shut up because I respect you because you're my dad. But
And he
I
punches harder than you
absolutely,
do.
yes, oh, much harder. And so yeah, so I just really, really dug that. I really, really liked it. Um, and then he ended with, it's like, oh, one last piece of father advice. You might want to change. Because again, it's like that's one thing that like I feel like would be hard with that balance is like, oh yeah, it's like because I can imagine if I was a superhero that there'd be days that I'd be coming back from superheroing, and in all honesty I'd be sitting around the house in the costume a little bit because I'm just tired and don't really have the energy to take my costume off.
Yeah.
um and then on top of it too, his dad's walking around in his costume too, so it's kind of like, well, it's a good thing Amber's up not out walking around and exploring in the house, because then secrets out.
Yeah.
um because let me tell you, if I was sitting in the room for an hour, I would be kind of looking. I'd kind of start getting the itch to get up and move around and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is this is actually a change from the comics to the TV series that we didn't bring up before, but Seance Dog, uh, as Mark's favorite comic book,
Yep.
because in the comics his favorite comic book is Science Dog, and it's kind of like this anthropomorphic dog that um it's kind of like a futuristic Indiana Jones, I guess, would be kind of like the comic.
Something
Fun
like that.
fun little fact, or fun little thing is that early on in the series Mark actually meets Science Dog. He actually gets to interact with the Science Dog character. So fingers crossed we get Seance Dog in the show.
Yeah, that would be
Maybe
great.
season 2 we'll get Seance Dog. But yeah, that's just for me as that to me that line is a little nod to the fans, and so they wanted to change it up a little bit, keep it a little different from the comic, and it's like, all right, now we're going to update it, and we're going to make it Seance Dog.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
so
wonder if
for
there was a
everybody that's a comic book fan will know.
yeah, I wonder if there was a rights issue. Um, because Science Dog was actually a comic book that Robert Kirkman created, I think. Um, and so I wonder
But
if he just
why would there be a rights issue though?
because
Because
he didn't have full rights because I don't. It depends on who the artist was. Might not. I don't know.
that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I
Yeah,
just like that
I don't either because I
for
know
it
there.
for me it was like we're just change to me it only thing about it is like it to me they're changing it up a little bit just from the comic to the TV series to make it a little different, but not different enough that those of us that are fans of the comic, it's like, I see what you did there. I
Yeah,
see what you did there.
one of the things that Robert Kirkman used Science Dog was to kind of poke fun of the comic book industry a little bit. Um, because they talk about some of the different things that had happened, and one of the things that they talked about with Science Dog like was he they touched on Thor, where Thor, during Jason Aaron's run became a Jane Foster, and so technically Thor was a girl, and so they touched on that. And it's like, oh yeah, Science Dog's a girl right now. I don't even know what that's about. Blah blah blah. It was like a whole thing. And so yeah, anyway, so whenever Science Dog came up, Robert Kirkman would use that as an opportunity to kind of poke the bear at like Marvel and DC and things like that.
And then another thing too that happened in this episode was, yes, Eve did discover that Rexplode was cheating on her with Duplicate, but near the end of the episode, Rexplode tries to get Eve back, And one of the things that's very cliche that happens in TV series a lot is that when somebody does something like this, like cheats on you, they make this big grand romantic gesture, which is what Rex Flo's doing. Like he's, causing fireworks to go off by the team base, and just like, trying to win her back. It'd be real easy for her to be kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I know you didn't mean it. You were just upset because you thought something might have been going on, but between me and Invincible or whatever. But it's just like, that doesn't excuse your behavior. It's like, if nothing else, talk to me about it. Like, if you think something's going on, talk to me. Uh, but no, he
Yeah.
cheated on her. And so I'm proud of you, Eve, for not falling into that trap, not falling into that cliche trap, and no being like, nah, we're done. Best of
Yeah.
luck to you with the Guardians, but peace out.
Yeah. So that's one of those nice things that it's kind of setting the path towards um, some form of healing and reconciliation that and I do apologize for a little bit of a spoiler here. They do end up becoming friendly towards one another down the road, like where it's not a
Well, in the comics, anyways.
yeah, in the comics anyways. So we'll see what happens in the show. Um and then we get some great Mauler twin dynamics, and um you almost think you might get one of the Mauler twins gets the one up on his brother, but luckily something comes up where the Mauler twin is able to be like, oh, if you were like the one who's basically the one of the Mauler twins gets the other one to admit that he's the clone and that he's the original. And then he's like, oh, well, if you really were the original, you'd know what to do in this situation. And the Mauler twin, the brother, sacrifices the other one to take out a defense mechanism.
The one that was forced to admit he was the clone, wound up sacrificing his brother. So it's just like,
Yep, I'm the original.
That's what's great about their relationship in the comic, is that they both genuinely believe they're the genuine article.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you, the Mauler twin scenes were so much fun in this episode, and especially like when the Mauler twin does escape from the prison cell and he's got the prison guard knocked out unconscious, but he's talking with
oh yeah, that was
his
great.
hand, like, just, it's like, no, you know what you need to say, and you see the hand move
As it
but
was supposed to, like if someone was actually talking.
if that was actually the Mauler twin talking, or like if that was the Mauler twin's hand moving, like that was the hand gesture that he would make. But instead, it's with the prison guard that's unconscious, more than likely probably dead, but he's unconscious and probably has a multitude of broken bones, because you kind of hear some cracking every time he
Yeah.
kind of whips his hand around. So yes, multiple fractures, serious head trauma,
Yep.
life status questionable. So yeah,
Quality
so
of life severely damaged.
but yeah, so those were great scenes. The Mauler twins really, in all seriousness, are probably my favorite villain in the entire series. I
Definitely up there
love
for
me.
me.
I love me some Mauler twins. I don't know if they're ultimately number one, but they're top three for me. I do genuinely enjoy anytime we get to see them in. They're voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. He does a phenomenal job voicing the Mauler twins.
Yeah. So to this episode's biblical theme is 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. To see what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. So when thinking about this episode and thinking about what would be a good focal point of this episode be, and for me, the most important part is that a lot of this episode is dealing with identity, and or at least like kind of like teasing it, because Nolan kind of does it with Mark, where he talks about their Viltrumite identity. Uh, in the beginning of the episode, he kind of talks about your superhero identity and that balance of your life. Um, and then, but the one that really got to me was Robot and Monster Girl's interaction. And this is what Robot says to Monster Girl. Is like, I understand what it's like for the world to see you and see one thing and never knowing the truth about what's inside. And um and Monster Girl doesn't get it why he's saying that, because she's like, you're ones and zeros on the inside, you're a robot. And um and so I'm not gonna spoil Robot's identity, because that's going to be coming up soon. um but um anyways, but I think of that, and I think of the life of a Christian. And a lot of people view Christians as we're supposed to be this one kind of person, and so we are seen a certain way, or the world expects a Christian to act a certain way. And so depending on where you are, they'll expect a Christian to be a really good person, or um, other parts of the world, they'll expect a Christian to be a really bad person. But anyways, there's these outside pressures of what people expect a Christian to be like. Well, what this is telling me, so the reason why the world does not know us, why the world does not know us as Christians, is that it did not know him. It does not know God. And we are, as Christians, each one of us is called to live a life that glorifies God. And when we're supposed to worship him with every breath that we take. And so for us to be able to do that, we have to know our identity in God. And as Christians, uh, it's so important for that, because we are God's children. And because when we become one in Christ, we are brought into co-heirs with Christ. And so it's really important for each one of us to know our identity in God, so that when the world is looking at each one of us, instead of them saying, oh, they're just some Christian, they're like, no, 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 this is a child of God. And that's really important. And so I hope you take that as encouragement, that to take the time to know your identity in God.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on was dealing with how people perceive you when they find out that you're a Christian. Um, so for me, in my years in ministry, my ministry focus was college age kids. So not just necessarily kids on college, but kids that were college age, because not everybody that when they're that age they go to college. Not everybody does. So I'm not going to restrict my ministry to kids that are actually attending university, which now granted a majority of my kids were that. The majority of the people that were in my ministry were people that were actually physically attending college, that sort of thing. But one of the things that would be always eye-opening for uh, some of the people that, for a good portion of people that I would work with in my ministry, would always, and talking about how people perceived Christians, they would always think that, oh, well, if you're Christians, you don't really do anything that's fun. Because I know one of the things that a lot of times would happen, like when we're dealing with kids at college age, is that a lot of times they tend to get really big into partying. It's like they're going out drinking, doing all other sorts of things. And so then when we would do our ministry functions, we would not be doing that. We wouldn't be drinking. And there would be people that would be in our ministry and would genuinely tell us, like, I don't know if I've ever had this much fun sober, or uh, it's like it's like I can't believe you guys are enjoying this much time to be with one another, and you guys aren't doing anything like drugs or drinking or anything like that. You guys are just having a good time. And so that's one of the things that, in terms of the way that the world views you as a Christian, there's a lot of people that have this misconception that people that are Christian don't have any fun, and that's something that's just not true. I have a great time going and doing stuff, uh, and getting to know people and doing things that are sometimes weird, that would be weird to other people, but I think they're a good time. Like, I play Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's a great time. I enjoy that thoroughly. Um, and so it's just, uh, but just being restricted to doing something, or the way that people perceive you, don't allow that to um, affect your relationship with them. One of the things that happened to me, and I think I've talked about this before in other episodes, but one of the things that really kind of annoyed me one time when I was reaching out to kids, and this was when I was running a ministry in Springfield, Missouri. I had been working with these kids. Teamed up with them and helped them run their Humans versus Zombies uh, game on campus, and which is a great game. That's so much fun. It's a very elaborate game of tag, but so much fun to do. Anyways, so I got to know some of these kids, and I saw these kids. They were having lunch. I was there at the campus, so I sat with them and was having conversations with them. I was talking with them about like the TV show Supernatural. I was asking them questions about Magic the Gathering because that's what they were playing at their table. I've never really played Magic the Gathering, so I was just asking questions, getting to know it. And so then the question finally came up, because at the time um, I think I was about 25 or 26 years old. And so I was a little bit older. So they asked me questions about me. It's kind of asked, like, well, what are you doing here? It's like, well, I'm a campus minister. One of the kids physically shifted away from me and leaned away from me when I told them that I was a minister. And so it's like, I've been sitting here talking to you about all these different topics under the sun, and I bring this up, and now you have a problem with me. What about all of our interactions until now would make you think that you need to do that you're, so to me, uh but again, I have to remember the kids, he was probably 18 years old, and so, not processing this sort of stuff. Again, I can't take it too personal, or I try not to. I don't always succeed in that, but I try not to. But again, that's just the way that he perceives Christians, or it's like, oh, he's a minister. It's like, what's he, and it's just like, I'm just trying to get to know you. Um, and so, like, I enjoy talking to you about these different things. And so it's just, um, so again, just be prepared is ultimately kind of what I'm getting at here, is that there's going to be times that people are going to look at you, think you're certain things when you're not. Um, the to think that you can or can't have fun, I just uh, you can. There's a lot of room for a lot of fun to have being a Christian, and so don't think that just because other people are saying you shouldn't have fun, or don't think that Christians have fun, just prove them wrong and have fun. Um, so, so Pat, how would you rate this episode?
Um, this one is a lot easier to rate. It's a 5. It is a solid 5 episode. Um, I can't even find anything to nitpick. I mean,
Yeah.
everything's great. What about you?
Well, that makes my job harder, because that's what I would give. This is easily the best episode of the series so far.
Absolutely.
I honestly, I do really feel like it's just going to, if I remember it correctly, I haven't, rewatched all the episodes yet. Where I'm watching this as we record these. But I honestly, I feel like it just kind of gets better from here. And um, so yeah, this episode's a solid 5. And even there's one little Easter egg in here. We hadn't talked about this yet. And again, it's just like setting things up for the future. and they have announced that they are doing a second and third season of Invincible. We just don't know when they're coming out.
And what they're
But there
going to
is
cover.
yeah. But we can I tell them?
Sure.
Multiple, which is you see him in the prison when as the guard is coming to deliver the food to the Mahler twins. You see Multiple, who is the sibling of Duplicate. And so it's just like those little things, like especially for those of us that are fans of the comic, those are just some great things. The entire episode is just phenomenal. They're laying the groundwork for the rest of the season and beyond, and it was a well done episode. And all honesty, anytime the Mahler twins are on, it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is a solid 5 from both of us. I mean, great episode. It was so much fun. All right. So, anyone with questions for us about the biblical lessons that we talked about in this episode, or other discussion ranging from anime, comics, or just anything in general, feel free to email us at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter at frickityf or at frickityfrack on Instagram and Facebook. Let's go put some pants on and let's get into the sky.